Sometimes when you're creating buttons in Flash, you might want to create a button that opens up a new browser window or maybe a new tab within your browser. And the functionality for doing this in ActionScript is a little bit limited. But if we can tie ActionScript in with JavaScript and communicate with our browser window through JavaScript, then we can do something a little bit more. In ActionScript, for example, let's say that we wanted to open a new window whenever we clicked on this launch button. And you'll notice when we click on this, it has an instance name of popup_btn, so that's the instance name we need to use in our ActionScript. I'm going to click on frame 1 of this actions layer here and hit F9 to open up my actions. And let's point to that popup_btn movie clip and add an event listener to it so that we can click on it. So popup button, add event listener, capital E in event, capital L in listener, and then inside parentheses we'll put the type of event we're listening for, which is mouse event with a capital M in mouse, capital E in event, dot click, because we want the user to click on that button, and click is all capital letters, comma, space, and then we'll type in the name of the function we want to run whenever we click on this button. So let's create a function called onClick. Okay, so we'll skip a couple lines and then we'll create our function by typing function space onClick. Since this function is being triggered by an event listener, we need to include an event variable inside the parentheses here. We can call it whatever we want. We can call it event if we want to. I like to be nice and succinct. I'm going to call it just E. And I'm going to type colon mouse event to let Flash know that this variable is supposed to store a mouse event. And then after the parentheses, colon void, and then we'll put our opening and closing curly brackets for that onClick function. Now when we're linking to an external website using ActionScript 3, we first need to create a URL request object. So I'm just going to store that in a variable called req for request. It's going to be a URL request object, so req colon URL, all capital letters, and then request with a capital R, equals a new URL request. And then inside the parentheses for the URL request, and then inside quotation marks, we would type in the URL we want to go to. For example, http://www.learnflash.com. So we'd put our closing quotation marks, closing parenthesis, semicolon to end our statement. So we've created our URL request object, and now we need to use the navigate to URL method and call on this request object. So still inside that function, let's move that closing curly bracket down one line, go back up to the previous line, just after our request creation there, and then we're going to call on the navigate to with capital T, URL, all capital letters, and then inside parentheses we're going to put in the name of the request object we want to navigate to, which is req, this URL request that we created up here. Now when we do it this way, this will take us to that website. But the results are kind of unpredictable. Sometimes it'll open a new tab, and this might depend on what browser you're using. Sometimes it will open that URL in a whole new window. Sometimes it will actually open it in the current window. Well, we can specify inside the navigate to URL, we can specify if we want it to open in the same window, we'll just type comma and then inside quotation marks underscore self. And if we want to create a pop-up,
Mind Bites.